Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. With all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. And I'm just delighted to be together tonight. It's actually our 5th year anniversary of being on Zoom. That's a mixed blessing. We had to shift to Zoom and leave our beautiful home in Armonk because of the pandemic and COVID. And unfortunately, it's still such a threat for so many people. We haven't been able to resume the live programs in person. But with this, it was interesting, it opened up the doors for many more people to be able to participate from far and wide and even at different times. So people are able to access the videos, and we have a library of nearly 200 videos up now. So thank you for being a part of that development, for supporting that. And here we are again this evening. So it's also a great evening. It's the equinox. So here we are, the shift into spring, this day of balance. Well, in the universe somewhere, we're looking at the imbalances in our world. But you know, one of the things that evolved from our ancient ancestors, observing the cycles of the heavens, the seasons, the sun, the stars, the planets, well, they began to develop a sense of a higher order. And that sense of a higher order also then began to inform, later as civilization developed, a sense of dharma. Dharma meaning a way of living in accord with the highest. And so Buddha talked a lot about dharma. In the Hindu traditions, the Dharma is central to that. So this sense of being aligned with the highest within, which is also mirrored without. So there's this correspondence to what's going on within, what's going on without. And when we get out of harmony, disconnected from that, we then create disharmony around us. And so there's been a real emphasis in the practices, and especially in the Enlightenment traditions, the consciousness traditions, about how do we come to know that highest Dharma. And it's often spoken about also in terms of seeking refuge, because part of what we know about how our own minds and bodies work, we need certain safety and reliability and things that we were seeing patterned in the universe. The sun always rises, the sun always sets. The sun is often used in ancient texts as sort of the embodiment of Dharma. It's unfailing in carrying out its duties. And so is a model for humans to be unfailing in carrying out their duties. Ours is more complex than just rising and setting. So we have to have refined discrimination, discernment. What is this about Dharma? And so when we're talking about that and talking about seeking refuge, again, that's spoken about in a number of different ways. But, we seek refuge really ultimately in the only place it can be found. The only place where that refuge, the steadiness of that, the unshakability of that can be found. We find it in the only place that fully empowers us to transform our worlds, inner and outer. So we're seeking this powerful refuge, not a momentary refuge. We seek refuge in the one, in the absolute, in the divine within. And when we seek that, we're really seeking refuge in that which is eternal. Everything else is changing. Our mind is changing. Our body is changing. We evolve through our lives. As our bodies get older, they encounter more difficulties. Everything around us is changing. So the only place that the great mystics, the yogis, the sages, the saints across traditions have talked about is being able to find that in the eternal, in the transcendent, in what we would call the divine. We don't have to think of it as a particular God or a Godhead or anything like that. We can just have this wide open, there's something that transcends and subsumes, holds it all in an order that when we are grounded in that, we get to know, then we get to know what Buddha talked about. Because Buddha, having sought that, because he went on his sacred quest to find the end of suffering. He looked around and he saw, even though he was a wealthy prince and lived in the lap of luxury, there was suffering. And he wanted to find the way to get free of suffering, not just for himself, but for all beings. And that's what he set out to do. And it was by plunging deep into the eternal, deep into that which is beyond the ordinary mind, beyond the senses. We have this extraordinary instrument called consciousness that gives us access to what's beyond the mind. However, most of the time, our consciousness is only focused on the content of the mind. Thoughts, feelings, memories, experiences, what's happening here, what happened yesterday, this person said this, that, didn't like that. That we fill our consciousness with. So that is an impediment. So we do practices to get that out of the way. So we can then come to know what Buddha discovered after years, really lifetimes, of dedicated practice. He came to know that, and then he lamented because he said, I can't just give this away. I wanted to set all beings free. And I've found the jewel. I've found the highest. And you can't give it away. You can't even put it into words. So what he had to do was try to articulate the means for each and every person to discover that for themselves, within themselves, as themselves. So when we do that, we find the ultimate refuge. We find what he then subsumed in saying the four immeasurables. You know, this boundless wisdom, boundless loving compassion, this unshakable equanimity, this boundless peace, and this boundless rapturous joy. So those are qualities of the experience of consciousness itself, this self-luminous consciousness that is the final refuge. It's that which is eternal. It's that which is present at all times, at all places. What the yogis call sat. Sat, that which is the same at all times and all places. Chit, it's conscious. It knows itself. It's not just inert. It's not like the light from a light bulb. It doesn't know anything. This is the light of consciousness. It knows its infinitude and all that it encompasses, all that's created within it. And in that ananda, pure, rapturous, loving joy, that's how the yogis talked about it, Sat Chit Ananda. So this is the refuge. This is what we're headed towards. This is where we go. And the great poet saint, the 15th century poet saint, is actually also quoted in today's e-newsletter from the same volume, Turn Me to Gold. It's translations of Kabir, done by Andrew Harvey. Just a marvelous, marvelous book. I recommend it to everybody to have it in your library. So Kabir wrote, that person who's kind, who practices righteousness, righteousness is dharma, who practices righteousness, who remains at peace in the world's madness, who feels all sentient beings as his or her own self. That person attains the deathless one and is accompanied always by the true God. The deathless one, he's talking about what's eternal, what doesn't come and go, what isn't born and die. He's talking about that eternal nature of that foundational quality of consciousness, pervades, creates all that is. We are endowed through this human birth with the instrument of consciousness to know that directly. That's the ultimate refuge. Now, having found even a little bit of that, a taste of that, a small measure, then we walk those qualities into the world. Because it's not we're just looking for peace and ease and comfort for ourselves. It's like Kabir was saying, who sees that and wants to give that to all, sees all beings as their own self. Because entering that state, even for a moment, we begin to see the boundary of self and other is mind-born. It's artificial. It's a creation of the mind that we then suffer from. This was also Buddha and all the great sages, saints, their insight into the origins of suffering comes from the differentiating mind that makes otherness everywhere. Once you have otherness, now there's separation, there's distance, there's lack and want. I have this, they have that. We want to dominate, we want to exploit, we want to control, we want to get that. That's what we see flourishing today. It's a way of describing what's flourishing is a-dharma. What's flourishing is ignorance. What's flourishing is the disconnect from knowing the truth of who we are and the truth of our intimate unity with all that is. If we were doing that, we couldn't treat people the way so many are treating each other now. So finding refuge, taking refuge, getting a taste of that, and then being empowered, because even a taste of that begins to empower us to walk that into the world so that we can transform both our inner worlds and the outer world. Remember that correspondence. Buddha said it very succinctly, as you think, so you become. So the kinds of thoughts, the kinds of feelings, the kinds of images we hold in our mind, they influence then how we act, how we become, how we manifest our nature in the world. So this is why yogis, Buddhists, and sages and saints of all traditions, the mystic path, become very disciplined about the mind and what we allow it to entertain. Do we want good company in there that's going to help our finest qualities, our congruence with our highest nature flourish? Or are we going to let the garbage in and then have to figure out how to get out of it? So we use that discernment, that discrimination, moment by moment. What am I letting in? Because that's going to be something I have to digest and get rid of at one point. So we discern that. We keep the mind in a refuge. What's a safe refuge for the mind? Remembrance. Remembrance. Remembering the truth of who you are. Remembering the truth of what's the nature of all beings. That's why then practices support our taking refuge. So we take refuge in practices in order to reach the final refuge, the eternal, the one, the source of who we are and all that is. So this empowerment that comes through knowing also helps us to become what one of my early teachers, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, used to call Shambhala warriors. They're peaceful warriors. They're warriors, spiritual warriors. They're warriors who are armed. They're armed with love, with compassion, with wisdom, with peace, with the ability to walk into conflict with a whole other presence. We saw this so beautifully demonstrated by Thich Nhat Hanh and his ability to walk peace into the most conflicted situations, into the war between Vietnam, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and all the surrogates that were being used by big power players at the time. He'd walk in with this steadiness, this calmness, this vision that sees, if we're not deluded by ignorance, if we're not deluded by disinformation, which has become an industry in itself for manipulating people, if we get free of that, we can then act on the truth of who we are, our divine nature. We can relate to the divinity in the other person, even if it's buried beneath layers upon layers upon layers of ignorance and violence. We still can hold the vision, see that essence, and relate to them differently. We saw that same spiritual warrior in Mahatma Gandhi. He brought Dharma, this sense of what's the highest truth. And quoting the Bhagavad Gita, he would say, where there's Dharma, there's victory. And he lived that. And he created a revolution based on peaceful civil disobedience. and was able to overturn, all those years of being autocratically ruled by the British. So even in the face of monarchs and dictators, we can be empowered to change what's going on, to walk that change into the world, because we've changed our inner state. We walk that state, that knowledge, that knowing, that wisdom, that seeing truth, that ability to speak truth, even to those who are actively trying to deny it and erase it. We keep holding up the light of truth, the light of wisdom, the light of loving compassion. That's our way forward. So we become those kinds of spiritual warriors. Oh, not by putting on big garb and doing big things, just in our own lives, moment by moment. How do we stand for that? How do we live that into the world with loving compassion? In a world that's turned so materialistic, selfish, as if you own more and more, that's a good thing. To be selfless, to be loving, to be kind, that's revolutionary. That's the kind of revolution we need. So we embody these qualities and walk them into the world. Then we're empowered to confront and transform, whatever we have to engage in to bring the world into alignment with what's that higher order. Because just like the ancients, we saw, there's a higher order that exists outside of just my own mind, body, and belief systems. I'm getting aligned so that I'm both in alignment with the highest order and recognizing, that highest order, that source, that's within me. That's within everyone. So we're developing that consciousness. We're changing our vision of the world, and then we're empowered to walk it into the world. So we can stand for equality. We can stand for freedom and justice, right? People used to come to the United States as a refuge. That's why France gave us the Statue of Liberty. Right? Though there are some in France now saying it should be given back because we no longer stand for that. I think most Americans still stand for that. And those that don't were misguided, misled, misinformed. So we want to be able to turn that around so that we really are welcoming all. So we can help free all beings from suffering, not just ourselves. So we, in a sense, also become a refuge by taking refuge, by really dwelling in that, abiding in those qualities. Then people can take refuge in us as well. People can know we're not going to threaten them because of who they are and what their choices have been in life. So we take refuge in this ultimate power of being. Being. It'll get reflected in what we do, but we're taking refuge in being. Because again, the practices, meditation, mantra, contemplation, selfless service, a foundational practice, serving others as the divine. How much of each day can we incorporate that practice into our lives? These are what ground us in these highest truths and empower us to walk it into the world. But the truths themselves, they're the very nature of our being. Those four immeasurables, those are our being nature. They are not done. They're inexhaustible, unquenchable. That's the very nature of what that infinitude of being, that eternal being is. So we take refuge in that. And then we discover our being nature is compassion. Not the little cupful that the mind tries to generate and exhausts quickly and then goes, I'm just too tired to do it. No, inexhaustible compassion. We discover that we are the truth. That's the nature of who we are. It's our being. So we can express that. We don't have to go looking for it. We've discovered the inexhaustible wellspring of truth and wisdom within ourselves that empowers us. And empowers us to deal with the changes that we may not be able to transform in the world. But we're coming to know the eternal nature of our own being, that's inviolate, that is untouchable by even the worst violence of others. We have that steadiness. Steadiness, the unshakable equanimity that Buddha talked about and other great sages and saints. That's a quality of being. That's not the ordinary mind, but the ordinary mind, its conditions are always conditional. I'm happy because. I'm steady and quiet because. Oh, because I had this need met, things are quiet right now, oh, people have been nice to me, I'm in a good state because this and that. It's always conditioned on something. That's the ordinary mind. We're talking about taking refuge in the eternal. We're talking about taking refuge in the eternal nature of you, of your true self. That's unconditioned. That doesn't depend on, oh, just things are nice. Things are good, I have enough to eat, I'm warm, all these things, I have safety. Even those, there's so many people who are lacking that. That's part of what we can be able to provide in terms of even the relative refuges that people need. Why are they called refugees when they're escaping violence? They're seeking refuges, seeking warmth, safety, comfort, just the ability to flourish. We want to support that, just as we would want that for ourselves. We're taking refuge in being joyous. Ananda, this rapturous joy, isn't because something was satisfied, some sense was particularly tickled. No, it's the very nature of our being. How do we discover that? We discover it in the stillness, the absolute silence of meditation, where there's nothing to cause anything. And yet, that arises. Oh, that loving compassion that embraces all without hesitation. Oh, we give her a form. We call her Tara. Dharma, the great mother, who leaps forward to relieve the suffering of all beings. Om Tare Tu Tere Tore Soha. That's us. That's each and every one of us. We are she. That's our essential nature. We can give it archetypal forms. We can call it Ma Kali. But we're talking about the true essence is beyond those forms. It's the very quality of our boundless, eternal, infinite nature. That's where we take refuge. That's where we go. That's where we become unshakable. Yes, my body can be racked by pain, but not that. Not my being. It's untouchable. We come to know that. Then, yes, just by the very nature of who we are, we're spiritual warriors because we're walking truth into the world. Whether we're walking it into ShopRite, whether we're walking it into CVS, whether we're walking it down the street, that's our nature. So we live those qualities, and we live them into the interactions we have. And then we act on them further. We say, oh, how can I help relieve the suffering of all beings? How can I support in politics people who are truly going to relieve suffering, who are going to stand up for freedom, stand up for people's rights, women's rights, stand against racism and bigotry? So we give our energy to that. We support that. Wherever it is. We have to reach across the country to help a population in Wisconsin or California or somewhere else, because now we have that ability. So our actions are now congruent with our highest nature. then we live Dharma. And we're supported by the power of Dharma, called Dharma Shakti, the power of Dharma. That's why Gandhi was so confident that where there's Dharma, there's victory. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the embodiment of Dharma was Lord Krishna. And the five Pandavas fighting the evil Duryodhana, the other branch of the family, chose Dharma instead of huge other army. Because they chose Dharma, they were victorious. Because where there's Dharma, there's victory. So we choose Dharma, we live Dharma, we take refuge in Dharma. And while we're doing that, we're taking refuge in teachings, we're taking refuge in practices, we're taking refuge in mantra, we're taking refuge in going into meditation to really enter the ultimate refuge. It's beyond the mind and always present, eternally present. There's never a time, there's never a place that you're not in the divine embrace. Oh, but to know that, we have to stop clinging to the mind and having it fill our consciousness with its thoughts, fears, attractions, aversions, everything. Let that go. Now we can breathe. Now we can come home. Now we can enter the divine embrace. We can see it was always there. Once we start to know that, then we know where to turn in times of suffering, in times of joy. In all times, in all places, we turn to that. That which is the truth of who we are. That which is the truth of what the nature of the world is. That which is the truth of every being. That's what we do. And so we unfold the consciousness of that, the awareness of that, until there's not any place, any time in our life that's hidden from that. We get to see it at all times, in all places, because that's the nature of freedom. Freedom pervades all times, all places. I saw this very starkly teaching inmates in a federal penitentiary, including one who was, serving life sentence without parole for murder. Yeah, it's such a transformative experience doing the practices, doing meditation, doing the mantra Om Namah Shivaya that we're going to chant in a few minutes. Simply means a bow to the divine within everything. But it was his karma to be in prison. And he knew it. He accepted that in the end. But he also discovered who he was beyond that. And he had visions of being flooded with light, of his cell being flooded with light, of coming to know aspects, dimensions of himself that he never knew. Growing up, beaten, abused, battered, addicted. It opened up by grace. Grace reaches everywhere. It reached into a federal penitentiary and found him. So we open our heart to that. Grace. The power of transformation. The mind can't do this alone. It can only go so far. Then it has to be just picked up and carried. The sooner we give up, because the divine is saying, I've been waiting for you to surrender. Surrender to my embrace. Let me carry you home. So we turn to the divine. We turn to ourself. We turn to that boundless, loving, compassionate, kind presence that literally suffuses every atom and molecule in your body. That's what it means to come home. That's what it means to find refuge, to know that, live that into the world. But it takes time, not fast. Like Kabir, another It's another poem from Kabir. He writes, slowly, mind, slowly. Everything unfolds slowly. The gardener pours hundreds of jars of water. The fruit arrives only in season. We keep watering. Every day, our everyday practices are that. We're watering. We're watering the ground of our being. Om Namah Shivaya. Pouring mantra in, pouring remembrance in, pouring love, pouring, the vision of love. That all beings can be joyous, kind, loving, and peaceful, free of suffering. We keep drenching the mind in that. That is something the mind can do. Rather than the mind entertaining all this garbage thinking it does, it needs to renounce that. It needs to set that aside and say, no. No. That's why people make vows to do certain repetitions, numbers of repetitions of mantra per day. 10,000 repetitions, 20,000 repetitions. They use a mala, beads, so that they're keeping themselves immersed, drenched in that. Because what's the mind drenching you in throughout the day? What are all the thoughts it's running through your system? They're not Om Namah Shivaya. They're not, oh, this is the exalted one everywhere. They're not. It's all the stuff that you're so familiar with. And what does it produce? Dis-ease, discomfort, distortions. So the mental discipline is so critical for changing our perception, changing our state, becoming available to the divine drawing us in. That's why in the Shiva Sutras, you'll see this ancient text from Kashmir Shaivism that talks about the various practices and the context for doing them. And it starts, well, it really ends, but the ending is sort of the beginning for most. And when recognizing there are practices to do, when you feel very separate from the divine. And those practices, like mantra repetition, like doing karma yoga, selfless service, reading, contemplating, writing repetitions, doing repetitions on a mala. These are all ways of helping to clear the ground, cultivate the ground for what's going to arise from within. So we do those practices. They lead to Shaktapaya, Beta Abeda Upaya, where we're starting to get a taste of that. But there's still active doing. You're still doing mental practices. I am the one. I am mantra. That's a Shaktapaya practice. Om Namah Shivaya, done on a level of silent repetition with the awareness, I am that. I am the mantra. I am the source of the mantra. I am the repeat of the mantra. It's all one. We are literally holding that awareness. Well, that's a Shaktapaya practice. That deepens the practice. That deepens our immersion. That deepens our direct experience of the truth. Till we get to the point where there's nothing more to do. Doing, even the invocation of a little doer, the little mind, I'm going to do this practice, I'll do that practice, I feel like doing this, I don't feel like that. That's all mind. That has to finally go until we've become so absorbed in the one that the final dissolution is the infinite taking us up, revealing our unbroken unity with the one. It was never broken. You were never broken. You were never separate. You're always the one. That's what the divine whispers in your ear. Listen. Listen for the divine saying, I love you. I am you. I love you. I am you. I God whispering, so near, so close, so intimate. Your very self. Listen for that. And watch all suffering wash away. All suffering. Come home to the truth of who you are. Abide in that. Walk that into the world. So we're going to chant for a few minutes. We're going to chant the Maha Mantra, the great mantra. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. It means I bow to the divine within. But the meaning, frankly, is the least important thing about it. It throbs with the Shakti, the power of consciousness, for knowing that. Mantra is a vehicle. Enter the vehicle that takes you to its source. Enter the vehicle by letting go of this thought, this feeling, this sensation. Whatever's arising, you just quickly, gracefully let it go and come back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. I am Shiva. I am the auspicious one. I am consciousness and bliss. Shivoham, Shivoham, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the auspicious one, Shiva. That's what's all wrapped up in the mantra. That consciousness of that, not those words, that consciousness, the direct knowing of that. That's what we have access to. That's why grace has taken the form of mantra, to enter the halls of the ordinary mind and set them aflame with the light of consciousness, the light of grace, the light of this highest truth. So we stay with that. So we'll chant for a few minutes, and then we'll just sit in the stillness, the silence of meditation. At the end of meditation, I'll ring a gong, do a few rounds of the mantra, close for the evening. So now we begin the chant. And we end with this prayer. And may all our practices truly benefit everyone. And may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. And namaste. Taking refuge. Taking refuge in the ultimate, in the stillness, in the silence. You come to know that. You come to know that presence, that stillness, that silence, that envelops all movement, envelops every moment, envelops every thought. The ultimate refuge, eternal, unshakable. We take refuge in the great teachers, the great beings passed along for thousands of years, their wisdom that they gained from entering that eternal source. We take refuge in teachings and practices that transform, that uplift, that help us to transform the mind. We take refuge in the company of fellow seekers, sangha, community, that we uplift, inspire, keep that light blazing in ourselves and one another. We take refuge. So each day is an opportunity. Say, where will I take refuge? In this moment, in this situation. How do I take refuge in the truth? How do I take refuge in mantra? How do I sustain that refuge? These we're empowered to do. So I want to thank you for being ones doing that and walking the truth, the light, your sublime nature into your everyday lives, into your relationships, into work. This is how we'll transform this world, by walking truth, by walking that light, by walking that inspiration, that strength to stand for truth, to walk in the truth. We saw that. We saw that with Mahatma Gandhi. We saw with Martin Luther King picking up that nonviolent civil disobedience and helping to transform our country. We need to renew that. Over and over, we need to renew that. Because there are people, we see it very blatantly now, who want to undo all the good that was done by such great beings. So, now it's our turn. We stand for the truth. We walk it into the world. We stand with those in need. So thank you for being ones doing that. And by taking refuge in the practices, taking refuge in your divine self, you're empowered, you're strengthened to be able to do that. So keep coming home to the truth of who you are, your sublime divine self. And walk that into the world. And I look forward to seeing you again a couple of weeks in our next program.